Hi, my wife had a difficult cancer for 3 years and passed away in 2012 when our kids were toddlers. I wanted to share from what we learned, so I've made videos in these topic threads behind me, which you can skip around. For more on our story, you can watch the video on our background. This video is in the thread on coping. In this video, I'm going to go into some detail on guilt and magical thinking. First, a definition. Magical thinking is when you believe that your personal actions or thoughts are the determining cause in events. Like if you think you need to wear your lucky shirt at home so that a sports team wins the game. Or if you worry about consequences because you let a black cat cross your path. It's related but not the same as superstition. And even as adults, it comes surprisingly naturally. Joan Didion wrote a pretty famous memoir called The Year of Magical Thinking about the year after her husband died unexpectedly. It's a great title, and though I only partly like the book, she used the title because she spent a lot of time repeatedly going over the details of what happened, wondering about each moment, and when and how it happened, looking for how it might have changed. Hers is one natural form of grappling with traumatic events. In another video I do about parenting during traumatic times, I describe that it's really important to tell kids that they're not responsible for what's happening. Otherwise, they'll come up with reasons in their mind that it's all their fault. It's not always logical, but it's emotional and powerful. Some years ago, I had a friend who prayed and bargained when they were in high school that their sick parent would live if they didn't eat for 3 days, but they couldn't do it. A terminal disease actually caused the death of their parent, but my friend felt responsible because they had a snack. Let's stop here because this is instructive. Kids are at various stages of learning how things work in the world, and come from a place where they don't understand cause and effect at all. Playing peekaboo with a baby is a laugh riot because they're surprised by you leaving and coming back. They can't explain and haven't become used to the fact that you're simply behind the object and then reappear from there. As we grow from school kids to teenagers and adults, we learn more and more about cause and effect, and so the world seems to work more like we expect it to work. And understanding cause and effect, we usually don't use magical thinking to assume we cause things ourselves. As I mentioned in the video on society and our understanding of the world, our laws and jobs and communities help to make things usually function in even more predictable ways. But sometimes events in the world don't follow laws or rules or any fairness. Car accidents, tornadoes, earthquakes happen. In that situation, we're suddenly confronting a world that doesn't fit what we've known or expected. And in those times, it's stressful and scary and comes kind of naturally to think, maybe there's something I caused or something I did wrong that led to this. In fact, we actually kind of want to believe this because it helps us to feel in control. If we caused it, then maybe we can do something that will fix it or we can avoid it in the future. Generations ago, people might believe that they caused an earthquake to strike a city because they worshipped false idols. Avoid false idols and you can then tell yourself that you can avoid the next earthquake. It's still natural for us to hope for a role in cause and effect of bad events because that helps us to believe that we can navigate and avoid things in the future. Painful emotions like guilt or regret are the other edge of the sword that we arm ourselves with. That sword is the idea that we have some power and control. Feeling guilty is something we take on because it implicitly puts us in some control of cause and effect in the past, present, and future. Thus, even as adults, we naturally tend into magical thinking of our power and effect. But let's look at whether our actions are a major factor. Let's look at, say, cancer, a car accident, and strangely, at a tide pool. First, let's look at cancer, which I have personal family experience with. But also, my degree is in bio, and I worked in DNA research labs for a few years. Life is amazing. Adult humans have about 30 trillion cells in their body, and each cell has DNA code molecules which are 3 billion pieces long. That DNA molecule is a chain with 4 different links, called A, G, C, and T. That DNA code can withstand some errors or typos in the order of those A, G, C, and T links, but sometimes those errors cause a cell to start growing uncontrollably, and that's cancer. So if you don't have cancer, you've got 30 trillion cells, each reading a 3 billion letter code correctly. But if a single one of them has a problem in the code, you can get cancer. Imagine a factory with 30 trillion workers and they all have to do the right thing without mistakes, or the whole factory disappears. It's amazing that some of us live to 100. And now keep in mind that over the course of our lives, we are outside in the sun, less or more, and UV rays can cause errors in our DNA. Or we eat less or more food with chemicals that can cause errors in our DNA. Or we get X-rays, which can cause errors in our DNA. Or we fly at high altitude. or we just get older, which can cause errors in our DNA. This is a really complex system with trillions of variables and actors. So can we really think that we control whether we get cancer? Or are there more variables and interactions between them than we can understand? If we don't have control, then should we feel guilty? Now let's think about a car accident and roads. I used to live at, say, 8th Avenue and 1st Street, and I needed to walk my kids to preschool every day at 6th Avenue and 10th Street. I wouldn't take the same path at intersections. I'd sort of go whichever direction the walk sign was green. At the first intersection, I could go east or south. Depending on what I did there, at each of the second intersections, I could choose either east or south again. Similar choices at the 3rd, 4th, 5th intersections, and so on. This simple walk had 55 different possible paths every morning. Your work commute might be a similar number of intersections and paths. Which path I was on depended on how the lights were timed, if my kids got ready or forgot their lunch, when I left the house, how fast we went, etc. Now what if one day a car slid through an intersection, another car was crossing just then, they hit and slid across the pedestrian crosswalk? Did I control whether I was there and got hit or not? Each of the two drivers also had their own path and choices through the intersection, so add in all the probabilities of them being in the intersection at that time. If my kids had gotten hurt, I might feel guilty that I didn't go a different path. But with all the variables, is my guilty feeling justified, or am I using magical thinking as a result of wishing I had had more control? Finally, let's look at tide pools. You probably already know, but tide pools are little pockets of water that get trapped when the ocean drops at low tide. The water gets stuck and heats up in the sun, and then gets washed with an occasional high wave that sweeps in, which brings in cold water and waves of nutrients. They're constantly changing. In winter they stay cool, in summer they evaporate, and when it rains they get diluted by fresh water. These pools are teeming with life. Thousands of organisms we see, millions more that are microscopic. Snails, anemones, starfish, crabs, seagrass, algae, and more. And what's more, there are millions of these pools all over the world, getting washed by waves, clouds, and sun, seasons, and rains. Their environment is constantly changing, washing over them with nutrients or things that stress them and make it hard to survive. To a starfish born and grown to adulthood in one place, that small ecosystem is all that it knows. Maybe one day, conditions offshore are right for another species of algae to grow, and a red tide is created, which washes in and kills lots of organisms, most starfish included. I think you can look at our neighborhoods, our regions, and our national economies as ecosystems like tide pools. They are complex balances of thousands of factors, being washed over by weather, natural forces, currents in laws, financial markets, and currencies, which all interact and impact each other. Offshore conditions circle the globe. In fact, our whole Earth is like a tide pool in our galaxy, with stars exploding, cosmic rays traveling, black holes swallowing. And the Milky Way is just one of a currently estimated total of 2 trillion galaxies, totaling 200 billion trillion stars like the sun in our solar system. We can do our best as we travel in our lives, but if you think about your activity in your city, in the state and country, in the global economy, and further in the Milky Way, it seems that thinking about tide pools getting washed over by waves from the larger ocean is a realistic metaphor. And in this context, how much of these forces do we think any one of us, from president to oncologist to parent, can really control? So these are some thoughts about coping with difficult events and the kind of magical thinking that goes on that then results in guilt and regret. Yes, we can have some impact in life, but when people are racked with guilt, I think it can be helpful to think about these coping mechanisms and perspectives. I hope this is of some help, and see you in another video.